Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Laura Prada from our Telesur studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with our news, checking out our headlines. Venezuelan National Electoral Council convened Venezuelans to participate in the upcoming parliamentary elections on December 6. Burundi celebrates its 58th anniversary of independence with a military parade. Palestinian authorities have announced a 5-day lockdown across the West Bank to prevent COVID-19 spread in the country. We begin with our news. You stay with us. We begin with our news. The head of the Venezuelan National Electoral Council, Indira Alfonso, convened all Venezuelans to participate in the upcoming parliamentary elections this Wednesday, the parliamentary elections which will be held on December 6.
The National Electoral Council also informs the Venezuelan people that having established the basic normative framework that regulates the electoral process corresponding to the 2020 parliamentary elections, the body announces that today, July 1, 2020, in meeting with the directive, we have unanimously approved the call to the electoral process and the electoral timetable for the elections to be held in December for the elections of the deputies who will perform their duties during the period 2021-2026. Venezuelans, the whole country is called for the electoral process to elect the National Assembly for the period between 2021 and 2026.
In addition, the Electoral Council President offered details of the participation of different political organizations in these upcoming parliamentary elections.
It is important to highlight that in these parliamentary elections, we will see a considerably broader participation of political organizations. Today, we have 29 registered national political organizations, 6 organizations of indigenous people and communities, and 53 regional parties, for a total of 89 organizations legally registered and fully enabled to participate in this upcoming electoral process.
Moving on to Brazil, because they surpassed 60,000 deaths related to COVID-19, the second highest number to death toll in the world after the United States, with nearly 1.5 million confirmed cases.
We have total confirmed death of 6,610, with 1,016 new deaths. A total of 1,447,000 cases, with 45,462 new registered cases.
An Uruguay's Foreign Minister Ernesto Talvi, who shot the international prominence when he oversaw the repatriation of foreign passengers from a coronavirus-striking cruise ship, has announced his resignation. In a letter to President Luis Lacalle Pou, he posted on Twitter and said that he intended to remain as minister until the end of the year to preside over the country's rotating presidency of Mercosur regional bloc. Talvi's move had been expected after he announced his intention last month to devote more time to his Ciudadanos political party, one of the five in Uruguay's governing coalition. And Dominican airports and hotels reopened in the Dominican Republic. We must say, airports and hotels reopened this Wednesday after borders were closed for more than 100 days. Tourism activity contributed 26% of the hard currency income of the Dominican Republic in last year and is key to its economy. The Las Americas International Airport in Santo Domingo is gradually beginning to welcome travelers, but will operate at barely a third of its normal passenger traffic. Of the 45 to 50 daily flights that it regularly received before the COVID-19 pandemic, this July 1st will see the arrival of 14 flights from New York, Boston, Miami, Orlando, San Juan, and Madrid. And hundreds of farmers and fishers across St. Kitts and Nevis continue to benefit from a government stimulus package introduced in response to the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. As part of the comprehensive $120 million stimulus package, the St. Kitts and Nevis government has invested $10 million to boost production in the agriculture sector and ensure greater food security for the country. Prime Minister Timothy Harris revealed that to date, his administration has spent $4.9 million on the fishery, crop and livestock sectors, which are said to play a major role in the continued development of the Caribbean nation. Like this, we go for a first break. Remember, follow us on Twitter at Telesur English and on my account at Laura P. Telesur. We'll be right back with some more news. We are back with our news. Burundi celebrates its 58th anniversary of independence with a military parade. At national level, the celebrations were held at the Boulevard de la Independence in Bujumbura Town Hall. President Evariste Ndayishimiye is presiding over the celebrations. The celebrants have been treated to a grand parade mounted by the army and the police. For the civil parade, the workforce is set at 58 people per institution. The civil parade divided into two groups, state, para-state and private institutions on the one hand and Adventist Youth cheerleaders, Habana, Bantare and Scouts on the other. Burundi claimed independence on July 1st, 1962 and legally changed its name from Rwanda-Urundi to Burundi.
On this day, there is no Burundian who could not celebrate, except a Burundian who is used by the colonists. There is no Burundian who does not know this day because it is a day that reminds us of the mystery that the Burundians endured. Today, he, Kelly Nkurunziza, is awarded a Medal of Honor, an Order of Patriotic Merit, Grace of Knighthood, and he is also given an envelope with 1,500,000 Burundian francs.
And Burundi's new president has signaled that his government will take the coronavirus pandemic seriously after describing the virus as the country's worst enemy and announcing new screenings. President Evariste Ndayishimiye said that widespread screening and tests will be conducted wherever clusters of cases are suspected and announced that soap prices and water bills will be reduced. Burundi has confirmed 170 coronavirus cases, according to the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Meanwhile, Kenyan health authorities reported the highest number of new positive COVID-19 cases since the beginning of the outbreak in the country this Wednesday.
We tested 3,591 samples over the last 24 hours, and of these, 307 returned positive. This number now pushes our caseload of those confirmed positive to 6,673. Out of a sample size of 173,355 that we have tested thus far. Today's number consists of 289 Kenyans and 18 foreigners.
And Kenya's Chief Justice David Maraga warned on Wednesday of the collapse of judiciary programs in the country if the government does not provide adequate funding.
What the judiciary requires is some reasonable funds to be able to run its operations. You have heard the Minister Mr. Aden, how they are being pushed by the investors to ensure that court processes are fast. Because if the court processes are not going to be fast, no investor will be interested in our country. The judiciary budget is hardly even 1% of the entire country's budget. And I was telling the CRJ to tell Treasury that Article 173, which requires that the judiciary budget be deposited in the judiciary fund as soon as the budget is read.
And the South African Health Minister, Seweli Mcise, reported the country has come back to its strict confinement due to the exponential spread of COVID-19 cases. Mcise assured to be waiting for a greater growth in the number of infected people by coronavirus for the winter months. The minister recalled the national estrangement confinement of level 5 that helped to keep the pandemic at the beginning during March in South Africa and pointed out the circumstances could be forced to take it back. South Africa is the African nation more affected by the pandemic with a number of 159,333 active cases and 2,749 cases. And in Ethiopia, ongoing unrest have left 80 people killed after the assassination of popular musician Akalu Hundezeya, a popular voice during protests by the Oromo, Ethiopian biggest ethnic group. The military was deployed in the Ethiopian capital to prevent the protests, which, according to the regional police commissioner Bedassa Merdassa, have resulted in the death of 78 civilians and 3 members of the security forces. Also calling the attention of activists and social organizations in the country, the unrest proposes new political divisions affecting the position of current Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. In federal Ethiopia, power is traditionally derived through controlling large ethnic voting blocs. And Uganda's health authorities reported 4 new COVID-19 cases as the COVID-19 tally almost reached 900. After recently overcoming Ebola's outbreak on June 10th, COVID-19 confirmed cases on Wednesday rose to 893. Meanwhile, the Director General of Health Services, Dr. Henry Mwebesa, announced that the country continues the efforts to contain the virus as foreigners and refugees are admitted in health facilities but are not captured in the cumulative confirmed COVID-19 cases. And Ugandan authorities have granted access to thousands of refugees and asylum seekers in the district of Sambo as people fled from escalating violence in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. The Ugandan parliament agreed to open 2 border crossing points in order to deliver humanitarian aid amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Ugandan health authorities, in partnership with the United Nations Refugee Agency, have conducted COVID-19 tests while delivering food and shelter to those fleeing the conflict. Meanwhile, the UN agency stated that asylum seekers will be moved to refugee centers after they have completed a 14-day quarantine period.
We are not tired. We don't have much land. Our country is small, but we still allow them out of sympathy. I wish the international community also become sympathetic and help these people. These are not our problems. These are the world's problems, international problems.
You are putting, of course, accommodation, screening for COVID. As you know, it is a very special emergency. It's the first time people are crossing in the middle of the COVID situation. You need to play smart to put all in place: screening for security, screening for COVID and Ebola. As you know, there are also some cases of Ebola in DRC. The team are doing our best to be ready.
Time for another break here from the South. You stay tuned with us. Palestinian authorities have announced a 5-day lockdown across the West Bank to prevent the COVID-19 spread in the country after confirming infections raised to more than double following the easing of previous restrictions.
We announced closure of all governorates, as was the case of the 20th of last March, with the section of pharmacies, bakeries and supermarkets, which remain operating from 8 in the morning until 8 in the evening only. This starts from the morning of Friday, the 3rd of July, for a period of 5 days.
Palestinians took to the streets of Gaza City to protest against Israel's plans to annex parts of the occupied West Bank. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had set July 1st as the date from which the Israeli regime would begin the annexation of occupied Palestinian territories as part of the U.S. President Donald Trump Middle East so-called Middle East peace plan. Several thousand protesters brandished Palestinian flags and placards condemning Trump at a rally in Gaza City, while demonstrations also took place in the West Bank cities of Ramallah and Jericho. Hamas, which rules in the Gaza Strip, has stated that Israeli annexation of the West Bank would be a declaration of war.
The resistance must take action as of now, because Israel will not recognize anything called compromise or negotiation. Israel will only feel power, and we must unite to resist Israel. It is a mention of defiance and anger that is directed at this Zionist occupation for the decision of annexation and theft of our lands. We want to say to this occupier that this volcano will explode on this Zionist entity, and that they bear all the repercussions of this folly and this new crime. All options are open to confront the decisions of annexation and stealing of lands and toppling the deal of the century. The occupation must bear all the consequences of that.
And the UN Security Council demanded an immediate cessation of hostilities in the key conflicts, including Syria, Yemen, Libya, South Sudan, and Congo on Wednesday, in order to tackle COVID-19 in its first resolution on the novel coronavirus pandemic.
This resolution is setting clear priorities: a cessation of hostilities, a humanitarian pause, and solidarity to face the COVID-19 pandemic. There is no alternative to fight effectively the pandemic.
The adoption of this resolution is also of high symbolic importance in the sense that it proves that should there be political will, Council members are able to go beyond their divergent views, prioritize the interests of international community, and deliver a message of unity. In this regard, it should be considered as a renewed faith in diplomacy and multilateralism.
Iranian authorities have stressed that the United States is no legal or moral position to define examples of terrorism. Iranian cabinet spokesperson Ali Rabi also stressed that the United States government has supported terrorist groups and regimes, referring to the assassination of Iranian Major General Qasem Soleimani in Iraq. The spokesperson noted that it was a clear act of terrorism by the United States and rejected USA's claim that Iran sponsors terrorism. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin held a video conference with his Iranian and Turkish counterparts Hassan Rouhani and Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Wednesday in order to discuss the situation in Syria.
A project of joint declaration is prepared for our meeting that presents an agreed approach of our three countries to further step on Syrian direction. In particular, we need to cooperate in order to finally liquidate terrorist groups, to promote political process led by the Syrians themselves with the UN coordinating role. The Russian side supports this document that shows the determination of Russia, Iran, and Turkey as guarantors of the Astana process to pursue a consistent joint work to achieve a really strong peace and stability in Syria.
Also in Russia, the content of the popular consultation on the constitutional amendments promoted by the national government advanced. According to the country's Central Electoral Commission, 85% of the votes were counted, 77.6% of voters supported the constitutional amendments. The governing body also ensured the transparency of the entire process, reporting that citizens' participation in the popular consultation was 65%. Among the amendments, the Magna Carta stand out the constitutional right granted to the population's right to a pension and also seeks to limit the presidential mandate to a maximum of 2 terms. And the International Labour Organization has warned that the global employment crisis sparked by the COVID-19 pandemic is deepening. According to the ILO, the COVID-19 crisis has taken a much heavier toll on jobs than previously feared, and the situation in the Americas is particularly alarming. A study estimates that by the end of the first semester of 2020, global working hours were down 14% compared to last December, which is equivalent to some 400 million full-time jobs. This is more than double the number predicted by the organization back in April.
It's a gradual trajectory in the upwards direction. It is a continuing process. But I think the key thing is the geographic spread. We've seen this pandemic go across the world from its origins in Asia and Pacific and now hitting particularly hard the Americas, where we see the loss of jobs as being the worst in the world. The average across the world is now 14% reduction in work done. In the Americas, that's at 18.3%. And in South America in particular, the highest in the world, we're nearly at 20%. But the bad news is the most pessimistic scenario, which would include a second wave of the pandemic. That would mean that at the end of this year, from the current loss of 400 million jobs, we would still be at 340 million. And the Americas would still be the worst off. At the other end of the scale, the optimistic scenario would point to quite a rapid recovery. The loss of jobs will be down to something like only 34 million, still a very, very hard hit on the global economy. We've seen that the G20, which played such a vital role in avoiding the worst happening during the financial crisis in 2008-2009, it frankly hasn't been able to play the same role up to this point. So I remain hopeful that because of the obvious and stark need for greater international cooperation, the world in some way will recover its appetite for multilateral cooperation. You know, if there is one crisis that requires a global response, it is this global pandemic.
Like this, we come to the end of News Brief. Of course, you can find this and much more other information on our website, telesterenglish.net, where you can read opinion articles or watch the special interviews. Like this, we come to the end. The invitation has been made. You continue with us with Telesur, always together, connecting our global thousands. Next time, thank you for watching.